So this is National Hot Dog Day, and as you know, hot dog is my favorite meat, and I have a good one here, sliced in half with some pickles, onions, and ketchup, which is the way I prefer it. So enjoy a hot dog. And as you know, hot dog is my favorite meat.
Hot dog, everybody. This is Unpopular Front, the podcast for the left and loud. I'm Ben Yudishin. Happy summer. That's right. If you didn't know, I took a little break. I sort of backed up some stuff, but I took a little break for a little bit of summer relaxation time in the yard. I laid there and played Civilization 6 and listened to a podcast about ancient Rome because I'm a cool guy. Who knows? Maybe, guys, get ready for more Rome analogies. It's coming. I'm gonna be that kind of guy now. The Republicans are coming in like fucking Gaius Maximus or something, right, guys? And we're like Spartacus, and we all gotta be together. You see, I did it. I can do it. This is Unpopular Front. Today on the show, we have on Rich Juzwiak from Jezebel to talk about an article he wrote as a response to another article that was written about Pete Buttigieg from the New Republic. Rich is a cool guy and kind of went through some of the stuff, you could say this is almost sort of a continuation of our Pride Month. And we're so much more here at Unpopular Front. We're just like such good allies that, like, for us, Pride Month goes to at least mid to late July. So think about that. Sorry, though, as a rule, though, after this is over, I can't have any more gay people on the show. Sorry. Just kidding. For today, before we get to that interview, wanted to talk a little bit about the big thing in the news. Everyone's talking about it. That's right. The Squad. Some people say we don't want to call them the Squad because it sounds corny. And what I want everyone who says that you shouldn't call them, well, not that you shouldn't, but that they don't want to call them the Squad because it sounds corny is, I hear ya. You're probably right to a degree, like aesthetically, but here's something, I think this is an important thing, if you want to be like a sort of like a strategic, but, radical leftist, and as y'all know, I'm the decider of anti-Semitism and who is a leftist and who's a socialist and all that. Sometimes you just gotta suck it up and get in with the fucking program and stop complaining. All right, we're gonna call them the Squad. That's what it is. If we have another term, that's great, but we're going to call them the Squad. You got to get with the program. Stop whining, all right? Goddamn millennials. There's been a lot of consternation and people bringing up lots of Nazi analogies. Shit's getting real when people talk about Nazi analogies because I'm convinced World War II is the only bad thing most people have ever heard of because it's always what we say, as though there are not any other forms of racism and colonialism and genocide and extermination. Like, most people don't even know about the Armenian genocide, which happened it was basically World War I's Holocaust, and no one gave a shit. Just saying. There's other bad things in history besides the Nazis. We'll get to the Squad, but I want to stick with this, though, right? Because there's this thing that everyone is doing, they see a thing that Donald Trump does, and then they're like, oh my God, we are officially now in fascism. I don't think that understands what fascism is. Or the fact that what it is you're just realizing that all the tools that we've been having are already fascism in a way, right? Like that there is a huge history of America that influenced what became European fascism, and that there is a history in this country of doing the things very similar to what we've done in the past. This is not to say, obviously, it's all bad is my point. While I understand it's an effective rhetorical trick, and I'm the one who wrote an article fucking year and a half ago about how the local writer who blocked me on Twitter apparently made a comment about how like you shouldn't use concentration camps, and then it came back later this year. I was like, fucking use it. Call it concentration camps because it gets people's blood going, right? But I think maybe as we evolve in this conversation and in organizing and in how we're like building a movement around some of this stuff, that we also expand that a little bit. It's true that sort of the discussion of the Holocaust and sort of the memorializing and sort of grand narrative creating about World War II and the Holocaust, a lot of it is sort of, especially if you separate it from Jewish education, a lot of it is sort of, it's a relatively new look historically. But like these trends and these ideologies and these treatment of humanity across history, sort of, I think there's a correlation to the fact that World War II was the last war that everyone liked in America. Not even everyone liked it, but like that there was like a moral play that you could really do where it wasn't what basically all war really is a lot of just sort of imperial, resource grabs and material desires and, and shows of strength and all those things, and spreading an ideology, religious, conversion fantasies, all these things, right? But that there was an incentive in the 90s after the fall of the Soviet Union to create kind of a new framework for how we sort of think about military power and we think about empire. In the 90s, you can almost say it sort of is capped off with sort of The Greatest Generation and Saving Private Ryan and sort of a, kind of a different kind of sort of nostalgic military cultural production. I don't know, something like that. Is cultural production a thing I can say in this context? I'm not actually sure. Again, remember, guys, college dropout. So there's sort of this this emphasis on a very particular form of fascism that arose in Germany in the 1930s and 40s, and that is now the like touchstone, the reference point that we use for all of these things about Trump. And while I think it's cool to compare the American conservative movement to fascist parties and fascist movements in history, because it effectively has the same thing. It's very pro-capitalist and sort of talks about sort of reclaiming a broken past, and like we know what it is. And so I want us to also be willing to, when we hear Trump say send them back about the squad, and we want to describe it as a Nuremberg rally, which it is. It totally is. No question. Just, also know that there's there's histories of nativism in America that we can look at and compare this to, and also show the history that a lot of people who are now yelling send them back were the people who were being told to go back, like a few generations ago. And maybe there's maybe some dark reality of that. That's kind of what a lot of this sense of citizenship is that you now get to tell other people to go back, and there's like a sense of dominance and control that comes from that. Anyways, maybe I'll go in that deeper another time. But, let's talk about why the squad is the big thing right now, and sort of why they are, sort of how they're being handled by the Democratic Party. The squad, obviously AOC, Rashida Tlaib, Ayanna Pressley, and of course my girl Ilhan Omar. I love her so much, guys. I just want her to be my best friend, and I want to stand in front of her, and I will take so many bullets for you, Ilhan. I seriously, unless I have a kid, then maybe I can't. But I don't have a kid yet, so if you need it in like the next year, I'm here. That's all I got though, because by then I'll probably have a kid. Anyways, the way that this whole saga has gone through, right? It's easy, I think, to just focus on the different freshman representatives, based on their own personal story, or sort of like, oh, there have been these critiques of AOC, put them in a silo. Oh, there have been these critiques of Ilhan Omar, put them in a silo. And, and that I, on this podcast, have had critiques of AOC about Ilhan Omar. Hi, Max Berger. Hello. But the way that there have been certain factions across many different parts of the Democratic Party trying to find a way to figure out sort of how to handle a true outsider approach to being in the Democratic Party. And I think we are sort of learning throughout this year, I would say really ever since the whole Chelsea Clinton stepped in that Bungar Sargon of Akkad thing about, as an American, about Ilhan Omar. It's been sort of a constant repeating cycle, and then the anti-Semitism stuff will come up, You guys know that. We can go through this later, but give me a fucking break. But you are sort of seeing how a lot of these things that we're talking about as the issues, right? Things about like, choosing to vote on a particular border bill, or how do we interpret this? Is it anti-Semitism? Is it not anti-Semitism? A lot of these they're proxies for the future of the Democratic Party. They're fights about particular issues and sort of where the party's going to go forward. But a lot of this is really just about who's going to be the leader, who controls the narrative. And I think in many ways, people like Nancy Pelosi and Hakeem Jeffries understand that if AOC and the squad get enough power to actually control sort of the future of the party, because movements can absolutely wield power outside of the elected bodies. Look at why we have the New Deal, or had, I guess, technically, but we'll get a new one. It'll be green. And we have to remember that the way that it is formulated now, right? These people, even these like establishment Democrats, they never really can lose, in the sense that they either can win political power and keep being in office and keep having power and getting to hold the gavel once in a while and like go to fancy parties and stuff, or they just leave and they lose and then they sell their Rolodex and their soul and become a fucking lobbyist and just like, it's, it'll be like that thing in Veep where like Dan Egan goes on TV and he has to mention like 3 completely different products and in it. And like, that's basically what these people end up doing. They can't lose with the current setup. The only way that those people individually, their own direct class interest, and like the class interest of ex-congressperson who becomes a lobbyist, the only way that can become the only way that they can lose that value is by the Democratic Party shifting left. If it stays where it is or if it goes to the right, they're golden. So it kind of makes sense in a way that they are always going to be more conducive to punching left than to punching right, even though Nancy Pelosi was being primaried from the right and the squad actually supported them, and there could have been, like, if Nancy Pelosi had enough pressure against her from the left and the right, that could have been an actual threat, but they chose not to. And this is what they give back, right? This is what they get back. So it kind of is making me feel like we're getting to a point where the line is becoming much clearer about sort of who's on our side, who is a part of the coalition, and who we just need to beat. And I have to say, current Democratic leadership just kind of needs to be beat. And there's a lot of people who are running for president right now who kind of just need to be beat. And one of those people is Pete Buttigieg, who I'm going to talk to. Oh, God, what if I could talk to Pete Buttigieg? That would be amazing. I'd just ask him questions in different languages, right? Be like, oh, you don't speak Farsi? What a loser. He probably does speak Farsi, though, right? He's that kind of guy, right? Where he would, like, learn, like, languages from a bunch of different language families, I don't know. I'm not a linguist. but talk with Rich about Pete Buttigieg and his relationship to sort of the history of gay politics in America and more. So if you enjoy Unpopular Front, subscribe to it on every platform imaginable. You can follow me on Twitter at MarxistManny. I officially changed it to that because, well, no one can spell my last name. I don't know who I was kidding. So, without further ado, here is my interview with Rich Juzwiak. Well then, I guess I wanted to talk mainly just about the piece on the response to the Dale Peck stuff, but
right.
Also I saw you posted on Jezebel about the Cats trailer, which looks terrifying. So I might have to get your take on that as someone who saw that when I was 12 in Broadway when I visited one time with my family, and am a fan of the animal cats, but that musical looks terrifying, I have to say.
I mean, it's such a... I mean, Cats Forever was a joke.
Right.
It's so strange that, like, somehow... Because, you know, it was on Broadway forever. I think it was the longest running show at the time, and then it closed. Then it came back, and people seemed excited about that, and they didn't really think of it as a joke, it seemed. And then this trailer comes out, and people are like, "This looks terrible." And it's like, of course it does. It's Cats. You are familiar with Cats, right?
Exactly.
It looks worse. It was the worst idea that somehow looks worse than envisioned.
Yes.
But that's also kind of exciting because it seems like it could be a major disaster, and I love a big budget bomb. I mean, give me opulence, give me misguided opulence, and I'm so happy. So it's kind of exciting too.
Right. Yeah. No. It's totally. It is kind of like, I don't know if these people, like if they knew that that's what Cats was, like
right.
It was ridiculous, just like humans in like kitty cat makeup, like singing about like being sad, but that's what it is, guys. And it's like one of those things where like the bigger budget it gets, the more ridiculous it seems, right? Like you can't sand off the edges unless you just like do like the Lion King and you like make them into actual cats. But
totally.
this is, you just have Taylor Swift in like furry makeup. It's a lot.
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly. It looks awfully silly.
Yeah, which I think might make it more fun. Yeah, as a fan of camp and irony, I'm all about it. Anyways, today on everybody, welcome to Unpopular Front. We have Rich Juzwiak from Jezebel on. Hi, Rich. I'm so glad you were willing to come on my tiny show. So.
Oh yeah, my pleasure.
Yeah. So, Rich. As a writer are you a staff writer? Do you have a particular title that you've earned through the hard work of laboring in the content mines?
I'm a senior writer.
Ooh, even better.
Yeah, so that's my title.
There you go. All right. So Rich recently wrote a really great article that sort of went through this. There was a recent brouhaha sort of in like the sort of left liberal media world about a recent article that was written and published and then pulled at the New Republic around Pete Buttigieg by sort of a famous for sort of being a very sort of a dry, sharp-tongued literary critic, Dale Peck, about Pete Buttigieg and sort of his relationship to the history of gay rights and sort of the gay liberation struggle in America. And I guess I just wanted to kind of start with sort of, Rich, what was your initial response to that article? And was it, you think, different than sort of the mainstream response?
So I didn't see it until people had been freaking out about it. I was kind of out of pocket Thursday and for much of Friday. So I kind of saw the backlash before I saw the piece, which perhaps jaded my view of it. But I read it and I thought that it could definitely have used an edit or two. And that it was, I thought that it was mean. I thought it took some like unfair shots and even some some shots that I just don't think, in the realm of sort of the way that gay men talk to each other, we're dead on, like wondering about Buttigieg's sexual positioning, which like I'm surprised all the time how people how gay men sexually identify. I don't think that you can look at them and say, oh, you're a top, you're a bottom, whatever. Right. But I thought ultimately that it was this conversation that sounded very authentically gay to me. Basically, the way that gay men talk about other gay men, that Peck had opted to make public. And because so many people in the public, because there were so many straight people weighing in, they really have no idea what these conversations are actually like. And in fact, as allies, told on themselves, because it's like, oh, you have sort of skin deep relationships with these gay men that you're seeking to defend, which, by the way, Pete Buttigieg does not need defense at all. I mean, like he's going to be fine no matter what, even if he doesn't even get close to the election. So that something that also pissed me off too about the response is this infantilizing response from people. Like, you can't say bad things about him. He's gay. Yeah, I mean, yeah, he's gay, and as elitist as they come. A McKinsey alum. Are you kidding me?
Right,
like,
exactly.
What? So it just seemed like what really bothered me about it is that I just saw, and I should say too that a lot of gay men also thought it was homophobic, or they said they thought it was homophobic. I don't want to conflate what people say on Twitter with what they actually think, right, because I do think that there's a divide there a lot of the time. But there were a lot of gay men also saying this. So perhaps straight people felt emboldened by their opinions or whatever, but it just seemed incredibly lazy to me to say this is homophobic, like without even explaining it. Like you could take that stance if you want, but it didn't seem to come from any sort of intellectual work or processing. It was just a knee-jerk, this is homophobic. Probably stemming from the fact that Peck calls him Mary Pete throughout the piece, which again, yeah, that's an epithet, but nobody calls gay men Mary in 2019 except for other gay men. This is an antiquated term.
Right, like I feel like that's a thing I would see in like movies from like documentaries in the 60s, 50s.
Yeah, it's like boys in the band speak.
Right, exactly. Yeah, totally. Yeah, it's almost like a bunch of liberal straight people who probably like Mayor Pete's politics kind of went in and were like, okay, I'm going to Google Mary as an epithet. Oh, and then they act like they've known about this entire time.
And I've also noticed a lot of the gay men who seem to be the most rattled by this are and this is my perception, I could also be completely wrong about this, but what the sense that I get sort of looking at people, the feedback that I've gotten, are the gay men that seem to have really been shaken by this are those in Mayor Pete's demographic, upwardly mobile, upper middle class, best little boys in the world type of thing.
Right.
And so this feels like an attack on them. Yeah. And, I know it's very popular to look at people in power who with whom you share some identity points and to somehow transfer your hopes and dreams onto them, and you see them being fulfilled, and somehow that fulfills you as a human. But I don't really buy that thinking at all in a capitalist structure. I think that Mayor Pete, he may care about people in the abstract, and he may care about his people in the abstract, but he doesn't care about anybody more than he cares about himself, right, by virtue of his position right now. Give me a break.
Exactly.
So even that, I don't. Most of the issue I would say I took in the piece was with sort of straight people not thinking, but I don't think gay people did a lot of thinking either. I do think that, like, I basically think that if you haven't been called faggot, I don't need. Okay, so the biggest thing that comes from this is the straight people that are calling this homophobic are telling a gay man that, because Dale Peck is gay, that he was homophobic, and that I don't like. I think if you haven't been called faggot, you don't get to say what is homophobia, especially when you're talking to a gay man or about what a gay man did. That's not to say that gay people can't be homophobic. I think Aaron Schock, who is allegedly gay, voting against his alleged people repeatedly is a prime example. There are plenty of closeted politicians who have been actively homophobic systematically. But I don't want to hear in this particular issue, which requires nuance, which requires a great level of thinking if you're going to come down on calling Peck homophobic. I don't want to hear from straight people about it, basically ever. And I certainly did not see any good takes or support of this opinion. So to me, it just seemed like a really stupid response in the classic meaning of the word stupid. People were not thinking.
Right.
And so that was more, that was my journey with the piece. And to me, the outrage here is the speech issue. I can't believe that an article that was commissioned by a person who writes this kind of thing, by a publication who has published this guy before, was taken down without any proof of plagiarism or factual inaccuracy, nothing. They took it down because of the outrage or whatever. I mean, like, who knows what behind the scenes things went on. I'm probably even assuming a lot when I say it was commissioned. Who knows? He said it to them, whatever. The fact of the matter is that they suppressed his speech, and liberals are happy about this. This is crazy to me. Right. That's fascist. Yeah. The outrage is that a gay man's speech has been suppressed. Don't tell me about homophobia here. He's expressing gay culture for good or bad, and I think many people would say bad. I would say that there are bad things in that, but he's expressing a facet of gay culture that people find unsightly and are happy when it goes away.
Right.
And meanwhile, by the way, Mayor Pete has not weighed in on this. He's fine. Who knows if he even read it? And also, everybody should brace themselves for far worse attacks on Pete. Things. Kind of the shame of it is that Peck, his points about Pete's policy and work as a mayor, which he got largely from a really great, really long piece on current affairs by Nathan J. Robinson called All About Pete, which kind of dissects Mayor Pete's book, his memoir, Shortest Way Home, and kind of talks about his progressivism. They were all lost. Because of the outrageous language that Peck used. And I think that that's probably a good case for reeling it in so that you can speak to people. You can say whatever as a writer, but if you say certain things, you're going to totally distract from your points. And that was Peck's problem here.
Right. Yeah. You talk about in your article how the reaction to Peck's piece kind of highlights how for mainstream culture, especially a certain kind of mainstream liberal commentary, this there's a desire for not just with gay folks, but with people of all different sort of, oppressed minority groups that have their own sort of cultures that are not just a carbon copy of mainstream culture, just with different people in it, that there's sort of this desire to sand off the rough edges of it, right? And I'm kind of wondering, how do you think this can be used to silence actual legitimate critiques of a very sort of classically at this point neoliberal politician like Mayor Pete? I mean, it kind of reminds me of some of the critiques that you would hear back in the Obama years from someone like Cornel West, and then they would sort of throw him off and say, like, he's a crazy old man or something, when the criticisms were very rooted in the tradition and the culture of that they're using to say that is the reason why you can't criticize the
right. Well, it's a sort of a turning of a blind eye to maybe certain problems that someone like Buttigieg represents, which is that queer people are best marketed to the general public when they are as not queer as possible. There is no coincidence that our first openly gay possible candidate for president is a white man with a voice that isn't distinguishably gay, who was in the closet until he was 33 years old, who served in the military, and that's not to say that he's not authentically that. I don't know how queer he is, and I say this in quotes, in terms of like how he relates to the culture, or like, you know, whether he prefers Faggots by Larry Kramer to Dancer from the Dance by Andrew Holland. I don't know these things about him.
Right.
But I do think that he walks a certain middle line. Well, you know, he walks the line, and that this is a sort of choice that is made. If you look at sort of Prop 8.
Prop 8. I think it was, yeah, well, because there was the whole no hate with the 8, and the, you know, all the like celebrities would put the duct tape on their mouth.
Yeah, exactly. Well, if you look at Prop 8 and like the way that it was contested in court, the plaintiffs were chosen specifically. There's a really interesting documentary about this. They were specifically chosen to represent gay people without any problems. You know, there was this push for normalcy, this idea of like, here are normal people. They're not going to scare you with their fisting or polyamory or, you know, radical ideas at all. Right. They're just like you. And so it always strikes me as ironic that in order for gay people to be, for queer people, for LGBTIQA, whatever people of this tribe to be accepted as humans, they've had to reduce their humanity. And I think that to a radically minded gay man, which I think Dale Peck more or less is, given his public profile and the way that he has lived his sexuality in public, I think that kind of pisses people off. Someone like that, it pisses me off, you know. And I don't have strong feelings about Mayor Pete, you know. Like I'm waiting to see actually if what he has to say. But at the same time, there are no coincidences here.
Right. Yeah. This sort of dynamic between the assimilationists and the radicals, I think, is an important thing for you know, non-queer people, or those, or honestly, from the responses, it sounds like maybe some queer people don't actually sort of have a root in that history. And the dynamic that, you know, the AIDS crisis really dramatically changed the like structure and the goals of the, you know, of queer rights and the queer liberation movement. And that you know, in the article you note kind of the timing and how you know, as the drug treatments and sort of acceptance, and maybe acceptance is a strong word, but you know, as progress was made with treating AIDS, there was also a bit of, you know, the assimilationists kind of took control of the movement, right? And, you know, the trauma and the literal death and loss of so many radicals and so many people who were really looking to sort of change the culture, not by changing themselves to fit in it, but sort of change society to allow them to be more themselves. And, you know, as a straight guy, I actually find a lot of like power in that, of like they're sort of letting that sort of freedom go into the mainstream. They're not shrinking themselves, and that gives me a perspective and, you know, power in a, you know, it has like a sort of like broad-based radical power, but instead it just became about marriage, right? And sort of how do you think that dynamic between the assimilationists and the radicals is playing out in queer politics today?
Well, I think because assimilating is such an effective form of advancing in society, that a lot of gay people who are more assimilation-minded look at that and hold it up and say, hey, look, this works. Like, why would you dare drag somebody down who is succeeding in this?
Right.
And it's like, because the implications of that success are at least annoying. At least they have effects on, or they have potential effects on how other people can live their lives and how other people are living their lives. You know, it's sort of a commentary on that.
Yeah.
So, and this is an age-old debate. I mean, this was happening, you know, pre-Stonewall or just around the turn of Stonewall, you know? Mm-hmm. But I think that you'll listen to a lot of survivors of, you know, AIDS say this very thing. Edmund White wrote a book he didn't wrote, I mean, he wrote many books. He wrote a piece in the New York Review of Books about marriage equality, where he made this very point. And Edmund White just had slow onset. I mean, Edmund White thought he was going to die. You know, he got AIDS, he got HIV. I don't know if it's, I guess, well, he got HIV in the 80s and was just convinced he was going to go. And it just happened that maybe he had him in the 90s. I don't know.
Yeah.
I'm doing a great job at telling this story. Anyway, Edmund White makes this point in this New York Review of Books piece from a few years ago that, you know, the movement was about a lot more than marriage. In fact, it was outwardly rejected, this idea that, like, we need to sign up for this institution. That, I think, was much more the norm, at least in terms of the loudest people in the 70s, when they could pull themselves, well, I shouldn't say that, when they actually got politically minded or deigned to actually talk about this kind of thing. That was sort of the push, that we reject this institution. We would never want to be in the military because the military sucks, and we don't want to get married because we're not going to be like boring straight people. Right. And so a lot of people say, you know, and I've heard this repeated a lot. I can't co-sign it exactly, but it makes certain sense to me just looking at history, that a lot of the most radically minded, most interesting people died by virtue of the fact that they were so interesting and out there. Right. And, you know, sexually available in certain ways. And that created the rise of sort of this milquetoast gay. And keep in mind, too, that, like, this push to marriage equality, I think, was largely by gay white men. Yes. I would say that, you know, I don't have data on it, but anecdotally, I think a lot of people of color who are queer had many other concerns, such as disparity, right, and just like normal sort of people of color concerns that are very much present within queer community. The fact that Black and Latino gay men have such high rates of HIV compared to white gay men is a problem that persists today. And that a lot of these people that were pushing for marriage equality, these gay white men, these organizations, when it was won, they were like, our work here is done. And it was like, of course you think that it was, but if you actually cared about your community, you wouldn't. So I think that, I think it's largely sort of, again, a capitalist thing. I think if you have enough money, you don't have to care about other people. And, you know, given Pete's record in South Bend as a mayor and certain disparities that have been able to carry on under his rule, I worry that the same thing we are just seeing essentially the apotheosis of this kind of gay man. I wouldn't make the judgment just yet, and I wouldn't be as harsh as Dale Peck was, but I think his cause for concern, and I think a lot of smart people are similarly concerned, is completely the mood.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. And that sort of aspect of sort of focusing on marriage, I can't help, you know, as like a lefty guy, just sort of think like, right, it's because you have property, and marriage is so much about like the legal definitions of how you share property. And you have health insurance to help you, you know, to get PrEP, or to you know, if you do have HIV, to get the drug cocktail that you need, when there are so many poor gay and queer folks who, you know, their material interest, you know, and like the Maslow's hierarchy of needs, to go back to sort of like, you know, my freshman college sociology class, but, you know, like they're not being met by the society and by the current social arrangements, right? And those dynamics are constantly happening within these different groups. And I guess that's why, like, it's, you know, to me, I think it's really important for like socialist and anarchist and all the other folks to like make sure that we note that there's a lot, that this disparity within something like, you know, the queer community is actually it's a great place for struggle and solidarity and to build power, right? Because there are people whose needs are not being addressed by the people who are supposedly their community leaders, right?
Exactly. And you know, just because Barack Obama served as president for 8 years, that didn't eradicate incredible disparity faced by, for example, Black people. You know, I mean, I think it helped the climate of our country, and I think like what's happened since has been completely galling and horrifying in terms of the outward expression of racism. But just as like Barack Obama was not a panacea for Black people, Mayor Pete won't be either as president, or at least it's not particularly likely. It seems very unlikely to me that he would actually do things for the people who need the most. And again, I could be wrong. He could surprise me tomorrow with things that he says. But it just seems like an elitist is not the person to go to if you want to help poor people.
Right.
Just seems like really obvious to me.
Yeah.
And so, I feel like over and over and over again, whether they're straight or gay, people tell on themselves when they talk about Mayor Pete in these, completely breathless sort of ways. I say have caution.
Right. Absolutely. Yeah. He does sort of fit that mold. Before we go, I did want to talk a little bit about something a little, lighter, let's say.
Yeah.
But I think it could be a cultural phenomenon. Who knows? There was a recent trailer released for the upcoming film adaptation of... Is it the longest running musical in Broadway history? I know it stopped.
I think
Okay, yeah, that makes sense.
Phantom is now.
Okay.
Because Phantom never went off.
Right,
Yeah,
okay.
I think
But
it's Phantom,
Cats, Andrew Lloyd Webber's Cats, which I believe he wrote when he was like 20, which I think explains a lot, actually, in retrospect. But I remember seeing that when I went on like a trip with my family, went to like visit one of my dad's best friends from high school, moved to New York, and we went there, and we were like, okay, I guess we have to go to Broadway, and I was like a kid, so we went and saw Cats, and the trailer has come out, and I'm just sort of curious, what do you think's going to happen with this? What do you sort of take from the reaction to it, and is it stealing furry valor? I cannot tell, because I guess the musical is older than the furry phenomena, but...
Oh yeah, right. I don't know. I mean, I don't know if it's stealing valor. Maybe it's a good thing for furries. Maybe it's furry representation.
There you go.
There's like, people seem simultaneously horrified and delighted by this, which I think just goes to show that there really is an appetite for camp in a way that is never before. I mean, I think about like what would have happened with Today's Sensibility if Showgirls came out. That movie was largely destroyed by critics. I mean, I think that like there was like 1 2.5 star review in USA Today that was like, actually this is pretty great, despite it being awful, Right. I think that like it's actually, we've come to the point, because I do think that a camp sensibility is a sort of refined sensibility. It requires a sort of multi-level way of processing this thing. I think maybe we've become sophisticated enough, and also with the rise of the internet and the way that people's misfortune or miscommunication has provided so much enjoyment over the years. We've cultivated this sensibility so that people are really primed for something that is so high profile, that features a bunch of stars like Taylor Swift and Judi Dench and Jennifer Hudson. What's his name? Ian. God, what is his name? Magneto. Whatever.
Kellen.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. There we go. It is. It at once looks like the worst thing and the best thing. So I'm pretty excited. I wonder. I mean, the CGI fur they look like malformed, like they came out of the womb wrong.
Right. Yeah.
And so I wonder if it's gonna be like a Sonic the Hedgehog type of situation where they do a redesign, because obviously so much of that is CGI. I don't know. They're probably shitting themselves right now.
Right.
Those Universal Pictures, which is releasing it.
Yeah.
But I don't know. I think it's going to be kind of fun. Also, like it's really just. I mean, it's really the musical equivalent of a cat showing you its butthole.
Right.
That show is so up its own butt with its
terrible.
mythology and like what is a jellicle cat. It doesn't even define it, it'll give you a bunch of, there's that Jellicle Cat song that they tell you what they do, and it's like, but I still don't understand what a Jellicle Cat is. And it's just this like world that's like high on its own fumes, and so I think that like that musical is ridiculous anyway, and this idea was always going to be ridiculous, and so that it's playing out that way is almost like, what'd you expect?
Yeah, I know. As a fan of irony and camp,
this is what you came for.
Exactly. It's great. Like, I mean, it's going to be terrifying, and you definitely like don't want to watch it on psychedelics, but like I think it's gotta. It's gonna go down as either like people are gonna be like, wow, actually this totally worked, or it's just gonna be like a total train wreck. But like in the world where we have like, like an entire we have like entire TV networks just designed to making so bad it's good movies, like this seems right in line.
Right. Exactly. And we'll see. I mean, I don't know. I think that like the really big question when it comes to camp stuff is intention. You're always judging what you're seeing versus what you're supposed to be seeing. Right. Or you're saying, how could they possibly have thought that, fill in the blank? That was funny, that was pretty, that was cool, that was good dancing, etc. So, and there was a promo reel sort of behind the scenes thing that came out earlier this week in which everybody was talking really seriously about cats. So it'll be interesting to see, or to kind of sniff out how ridiculous everybody involved knows this is, or if really everybody was just like, look, we're doing cats. It's an important part of American culture, and we're going to do right by cats.
Right, and whatever being right by cats is, yeah.
I prefer that sensibility. I mean, that's pure camp. Pure camp is I made a total mistake. I had no idea what I was doing or how this would come off.
Right, but I'm still gonna kind of commit to it, right?
Oh yeah, totally. I mean, if you look, I think the most recent example of this sort of large scale camp that is highly successful as entertainment is Showgirls, which is entirely committed to its insanity. I mean, the beautiful thing about that movie is that you watch a bad movie and you get like 5 good moments a lot of the time, right? And they make it worth it, and you come to love all of it, but it's really just sort of like a few discrete moments that make this thing, whereas Showgirls just never stops outdoing itself. I mean,
right.
Yeah, over 2 hours of just insanity, more insanity, more insanity, more insanity, more insanity. Totally committed. So hopefully we get that with cats.
Yes. Well, hopefully, sadly, I don't think Gina Gershon's in the new Cats, which is a personal bummer of mine. But
the new Woody Allen movie though, and she's very excited for it.
Well,
so.
hey, canceled, I guess. Sorry, Gina. Oh man, that's
Yeah.
For the person of a certain age, maybe that still is a career goal. But anyways, Rich Juzwiak, thank you so much for coming on Unpopular Front. I really appreciate your writing, and everyone should check you out at Jezebel and on Twitter. And yeah, thanks.
My pleasure, Ben. Thank you.